to block the Apprentice Boys' March from the short section which overlooks their homes. They see the unionist organisation's desire to take local members on a circuit of the whole wall tomorrow as offensive. And their counter-demonstration seemed tailored to force the police to reroute the march.
The attempt to march around the walls and to beat the drums and wave the flags right in the faces of the local residents, I think it's taken a step further than tolerance is allowed in this community. So I think what you're seeing is a lot of anger at what has been a peaceful traditional march. It seems to be now turned into a triumphalist confrontational march. And the view on the streets here is it didn't have to happen.
But a few hundred yards away, senior unionists were unveiling a mural to Protestant King William when they heard about the protest. But there was no inclination to reroute the controversial section of the march to avoid confrontation.
With respect, there's only one side, I think, creating confrontation, and that is those who have apparently done a sit-down on the wall, denying free passage to anyone else who might want to use that pathway. Is that not the case?
The controversial section of the wall is just yards away from the hall which commemorates Apprentice Boys' exploits, especially the defence of the city against the Catholic King James 305 years ago. Members of a local band rehearsed there. The Apprentice Boys propose that only 300 local members march along the wall, while the 11,000 out-of-town members march along the city streets. They argue it's not just tradition. There's a sense that unionism has conceded enough since the ceasefires.
What I think the Protestant community are saying to the government, and possibly to the nationalist community as well, if you want that siege mentality to be removed, and I think everyone does, then the answer is to lift the siege. That's the answer. Don't put people with their backs against the wall, and they won't feel as if they are surrounded. And that's the way the Protestant community feel, and I suppose in many ways they feel like that about this demonstration. They feel that they're being asked to give up something that they deeply cherish and hold on to.
But it was just such a parade in 1969 and the fierce opposition to it which closed the walls and arguably sparked the Northern Ireland Troubles. So the concern is that this confrontation might repeat past history. The nationalist mayor, who was born in the Bogside, wants to dilute the parade into a week-long multicultural festival.
I have no objection to celebrating the past, but let's do it in another way. Let's do it in a modern way. Let's do it in a festival sort of way, which embraces the whole town and the whole of the people in the city.
It's an irony that the walls have only just reopened fully after 26 years and £1 million of investment, made possible by the year-long peace which has followed the IRA and nationalist ceasefires. But in the wake of the 200% increase in tourists come Apprentice Boys' aspirations and nationalist anger. Northern Ireland was shaken by the recent angry confrontation in Portadown when Orange men persisted in marching through a Catholic area. There's hope that the police are better prepared here, but so far there's been no decision from the RUC.
We're still in negotiation with them, and we will keep negotiating with them. But until we get the final word back from the RUC, we can't say what's going to happen or what's not going to happen.
So far, the RUC has distanced itself from the controversy, saying that it can only impose conditions on the Apprentice Boys' March if circumstances demand. Granting or refusing permission is not the RUC's responsibility, the force says.
The stakes have been raised in this year's Apprentice Boys Parade, and so far neither side seems keen to seek the good offices of a mediator which helped defuse the situation in Portadown. Jane Bennett-Powell, Channel 4 News, on the city walls.
After the break, a full news summary and...
...tried to block the routes of loyalist apprentice boy parades in Londonderry and Belfast. Our Ireland correspondent Tom Bradby reports.
Early this morning, the police moved in to remove protesters from the Ormeau Road in Belfast. Scuffles followed and plastic bullets were fired. Several people were injured. In Londonderry, shortly afterwards, further confrontation. The Apprentice Boys wanted to walk around the walls for the first time since 1969. These protesters had been in place all night, determined to try and stop them passing a nationalist area. they did not succeed.
We have just been told by a chief inspector that the decision is that the march is to be brought through the walls.
We're asking you to move.
We wouldn't do it in a unionist area. We don't expect them to do it in a nationalist or republican area. I think we can strike a balance.
In the end, the march proceeded peacefully. The protesters, now beneath the walls, turned their backs. As so often with these marches, there was no absolute right and no absolute wrong today, but it proved once again how hard it is to achieve a compromise here. Tom Bradby, ITN, in Londonderry.
One of the Labour Party's most senior figures
in Londonderry. Only one loyalist parade has been allowed through this Catholic area this year. Others have been rerouted away. Today, it seemed the RUC was determined that the apprentice boys would pass, and some officers in riot gear began clearing Catholic protesters from the road as the parade approached. Stones and bottles were thrown, despite shouted appeals from protest organisers. As the Catholics were pushed further back, the trouble escalated. As the crowd moved away, there were more disturbances at another line of police. Here, plastic bullets were fired. This man was hit in the face by one. Meanwhile, the 20 apprentice boys and their band, to the cheers of their supporters, marched into the Catholic area, protected by RUC Land Rovers. Local people were enraged by the police actions.
What did the peaceful protesters do today to get hit with plastic bullets? When they went into us on that road, they were kicking us in the face, they were pulling us by an neck. The whole thing was just totally ridiculous.
I'm absolutely satisfied with the manner in which it was handled by the police. I think they behaved with commendable restraint in the face of vicious opposition.
In Derry, more protesters, including leading Sinn Féin member Martin McGuinness, were moved off the old city walls to allow another parade. There was tension, but no disturbances. Dennis Murray, BBC News, Belfast.
Labour's former deputy leader...
The trouble happened shortly after the RUC told residents from the Bogside they were taking part in an illegal demonstration. As the police moved in, the protesters sat down before being forcibly removed. Around 200 people had maintained a presence there since yesterday afternoon. They were objecting to plans by 300 local apprentice boys, accompanied by bands, parading past a stretch of the walls which overlooked the Bogside. The march went ahead, with the apprentice boys completing a circuit of the walls.
They knew what they were at. They attacked a peaceful demonstration. They allow a group of bigots, they parade round a section of the walls where they're not wanted.
Absolutely no violence ensued as a result of the police operation to ensure that the peace was preserved at that particular point, and our intervention was simply to move that number of protesters to the side of the route so that no violence would ensue, and I think the results speak for themselves on that point.
The governor of the apprentice boys says the parade around the walls was not triumphalist.
Some people on the national side, relationships has been soured, but the majority of them, and they showed it by not coming out like the way some of them did. The majority of the people, and I'm under no illusion, if they had wanted to come out in their thousands, it would have been a different thing. They didn't. Most of them showed the same way as we do, civil and religious liberty.
In the last few hours, trouble flared. Apprentice boys threw bottles at nationalists. Later, young people from the Bogside attacked the police with stones. One plastic bullet was fired by the...
and petrol bombs at the police.
The disturbances that followed the parade in Derry continued into the evening, centred on one gate in the old city walls. The trouble started after apprentice boys threw bottles at Catholics. The Catholics in turn clashed with police. Scenes reminiscent of the start of the Troubles, the old issue of parades and the newer issue of their routes, showing starkly just how divided Northern Ireland still is. That all this goes to the heart of the matter was obvious in Belfast too, when police began clearing Catholic protesters from the Ormer Road as apprentice boys on the way to Derry approached. The police said their intention was to clear half the roadway, but scuffles developed, and from there the situation deteriorated. Stones and bottles were thrown, despite shouted appeals from protest organisers.
Stop!
As the Catholics were pushed further back, there were more disturbances at another line of police. Here, plastic bullets were fired. This man was hit in the face by one. Meanwhile, the 20 apprentice boys and their band, to the cheers of their supporters, marched into the Catholic area, protected by RUC Land Rovers. Senior officers rejected criticism of their action.
I'm absolutely satisfied with the manner in which it was handled by the police. I think they behaved with commendable restraint in the face of vicious opposition.
Sinn Féin organised another protest this afternoon. A leading member said nails were being hammered in the coffin of the peace process.
I believe that the peace process is quite seriously in jeopardy, and I believe, and I'm not one for engaging in rhetoric. I am trying to express the feelings that people around me are expressing.
The Derry parade began peacefully. The apprentice boys allowed, for the first time since the start of the Troubles, to walk their old route on the city walls. Here too, Catholic protesters blocked their way. Nationalist and Republican politicians furious with police, who again cleared the way for the marchers.
I hope that the sort of thing that happened today will not damage the peace, but it has certainly damaged the police.
As Protestant marchers passed, the situation summed up as Catholic demonstrators turned their backs. Dennis Murray, BBC News, Belfast.
British violence, which flared after the Apprentice Boys' March in Derry, continued through the night in the city. Police officers fired baton rounds as youths hurled petrol bombs and stones. Windows were smashed in a large number of shops and commercial premises in the Shipquay Street, Waterloo Place and Butcher Street areas of the city. The worst hit was the new Heritage Centre in Butcher Street. 35 windows were smashed. A crane and lorry at the new Foyleside Centre were damaged by fire, while a van was hijacked and burnt out at Rossville Street. In Armagh, 3 buses were completely destroyed and 2 others damaged in an arson attack at the city's Ulster bus depot around 2:30 this morning. Police and fire crews who responded to the emergency call were confronted by a 150-strong mob hurling bottles and missiles. 1 fireman was injured. In Belfast, a city bus was hijacked by an armed man at the Ladybrook terminal. The cab of the vehicle was set on fire. On the Lower Ormeau Road, police say 2 cars were damaged by fire.
The DUP Deputy Leader Peter Robinson has criticised a Sinn Féin councillor over his claim that another nail has been driven into the coffin of the peace process. Alex Maskey made the comment at a protest rally on the Ormeau Bridge yesterday, but Mr Robinson has accused him of threatening to start up a violent campaign again.
Staged a series of counter-demonstrations and the trouble flared when around 30 broke into the grounds of Belfast College at Millfield. They fired stones, bottles and missiles at the head of the Republican parade as it made its way along the lower falls. A window was smashed in a van taking part in the parade and at least 1 marcher was hurt. There was pandemonium as parts of the crowd surged towards the area where the attack was launched. After a second attack, police in riot gear were ordered into the school grounds. At least 1 policeman was injured in these clashes. The police also came under attack from Republican stone throwers at Divis Street. A busload of loyalists from Carrickfergus also attempted to block part of the march in Royal Avenue. Thousands of Republicans converged on the City Hall for the rally, marking the 24th anniversary of internment, and which took as its theme a call for all-party talks. The crowd heard Sinn Féin President Gerry Adams say his party's commitment to peace should not have to undergo any test. He forecast Republicans will break the British connection and build a new and inclusive society.
Peace can only be built when the British government and the Unionists become part of the peace process. Now, for decades, we were told that we were the problem. We were told that the IRA was the problem. 1 year on, it is clear that the British government is the obstacle to peace in our country. And it's clear that the position of the unionist leaderships is the problem.
The SDL
Flared after the Apprentice Boys March in Derry continued through the night in the city. Police officers fired plastic bullets as youths hurled petrol bombs and stones. Windows were smashed in business premises in the Shipquay Street, Waterloo Place and Butcher Street areas of the city. Worst hit was Derry's new Heritage Centre in Butcher Street, where 35 windows were smashed. A crane and lorry at the new Foyleside Centre were damaged by fire, while a van was hijacked and burnt out at Rossville Street. In Armagh, 3 Ulster buses were destroyed and 2 others damaged in an arson attack at the city's bus depot at Lochgall Road. Police and fire crews who responded to the emergency call were confronted by a mob hurling bottles and missiles. A fireman was injured. In Belfast, a city bus was hijacked by an armed man at the Ladybrook terminal. The cab of the vehicle was set on fire. And on the Lower Omo Road, 2 cars were damaged by fire.
The DUP Deputy Leader Peter Robinson has criticised the Sinn Féin councillor over his claim that another nail has been driven into the coffin of the peace process. Alex Maskey made the comment at a protest rally on the Omo Bridge yesterday. Mr Robinson has accused him of threatening to start up a violent campaign again.
Some sporadic confrontation with the RUC near Andersonstown police station. As the rally reached Millfield, loyalists threw stones from behind a fence and nationalists ran off in pursuit. Stewards brought the situation under control as the police prepared to fire plastic bullets. North of the city, marchers and bands, including one from Glasgow, also headed for the city centre. As they approached, a group of about 50 loyalists who had travelled by bus from Carrickfergus blocked the way. After negotiations with the police, they finally moved off just before the Nationalist March arrived. At the rally outside Belfast City Hall, Sinn Féin President Gerry Adams said the peace process was in crisis unless all-party talks began.
We have spent our entire lives in struggle, and we will not see it frittered away because the British government or unionist leadership lacks the courage to grasp the hand of friendship.
On disarming the IRA, he ruled out the surrender of arms. A heckler called out, "Bring back the IRA."
They haven't gone away, you know.
Several business premises were damaged by petrol bombs as violence flared in Derry in the early hours. This morning, clearing up was going on in various areas of the city. There were burned out vehicles in the Bogside and at the site of the new Foyleside shopping centre.
What it really underlines is the fact that agreement does not exist in this society, and therefore one tradition feels threatened by the other. And that underlines the terrible urgency of dialogue.
Meanwhile, at the Ulster bus depot in Armagh, damage estimated at around £250,000 was caused when 3 buses were destroyed and 2 more badly damaged after being set on fire in the early hours of this morning. There was also evidence of the damage caused by overnight violence in the Ormo Road area of Belfast, which the police are putting down to vandalism rather than to any political motive. In spite of the disturbances, visitors to the
Ireland with overnight disturbances in Belfast and Londonderry. The tension spilled over into today as the parade made its way to the city centre. Loyalists attacked it with missiles. Republicans responded. Police moved in to separate both sides, plastic bullet guns at the ready. Sinn Féin stewards tried to defuse the trouble, but it quickly passed and the parade moved on to City Hall. The ceasefire's here, nearly 1 year old. It's time to talk, says Gerry Adams.
Where does the peace process go now? It can go nowhere until the British government engage with it.
Sinn Féin's views today echoed by the nationalist SDLP, its leader John Hume calling on the Prime Minister to name a date in early September when it intends to bring all parties round the table. Fergal McKinney, ITN, Belfast.
Belfast City Hall, that Gerry Adams said the IRA had not gone away. This morning he said the comments were not a threat.
There was no threat in anything that I said yesterday. I think those who have swooped on that remark were going to take exception to what I was saying anyway. And to take that remark out of the context of the rally and the general banter is to miss the main point. The main point is that we haven't got peace, that We should all be using our influence and our collective mandates in this situation to move the process forward.
Mr Adams maintained that all party talks were Sinn Féin's minimum demand.
I'm expecting the British government to call all party talks. They can't use the Unionists as an excuse. Whether a party seeks to attend such talks or when they will attend those talks is another issue. But the British government certainly can't dodge its responsibility.
The DUP MP, Peter Robinson, has meant that the IRA hasn't gone away. He claims it was an attempt by Sinn Féin to get the government to bow down further to its demands.
It was an unguarded comment by him, but very clearly it showed, first of all, the truth that the IRA have not gone away. The reason he said it, of course, was to act as a threat to the government, to ensure that the government would be on its toes and would obey its next command. That's really what it's all about. The IRA lay down the law and the government has to respond to it.
A Ballycastle nursing home owner has admitted 7
have prompted the force to launch an inquiry into the police's handling of the protest. On 5 other occasions this year, the RUC blocked loyalist parades, including this Apprentice Boys March, from passing along the Lower Ormo.
The RUC say they don't have a policy on parades. They make their decisions on a day-to-day basis. But one man is able to ban controversial marches, the Secretary of State. But so far, he hasn't used that power.
Despite the violence in Belfast and Londonderry, Unionist and Nationalist politicians believe a forum should be set up to mediate over future controversial parades.
Certainly the ad hoc approach to parades is clearly not working, and it may well be that the Apprentice Boys, in negotiation with the police or other organisations or the political parties, could try and set up a mechanism. I don't think that would be unhelpful at this current time.
I would have to go along with that view, because I think after this year, when the marches are all over, it is possible that there will be some kind of a peace commission set up to look into the next year's marching. And that would involve all the people concerned in that part of Belfast.
But some on the Lower Ormo say such ideas are too little too late.
It's a wee bit late, isn't it? Well, like we've been saying this here for 3.5 years. Chris McGimsey argued against us when we argued this in the Europa, but I'm glad he's now coming on board. But he's had his day. No, it's all right to come out and say this after all this has happened. You know, but how much damage has this done?
The Mayor of Derry, John Kerr, backs the idea of a mediation mechanism to oversee future disputed parades. But that's treated with scepticism by some nationalists in the city.
As far as we're concerned, we feel that at this moment in time, the Apprentice Boys are likely to say, certainly we discussed this, and they'll discuss it for the next 363 days until the next march comes along, and then they'll be looking to march along the walls again.
The Irish government has asked officials in the Anglo-Irish Secretariat at Merryfield for a report on the weekend disturbances. Meanwhile, once again, the communities on both sides of the Ormo Bridge are bracing themselves for another potential clash this weekend, with another march by the Royal Black Preceptory scheduled to go down the Lower Ormo Road.
Everybody was just running towards the police, and I was telling everybody to calm down, my hands up in the air, telling them to calm down, and saying the police there's no need for all the pushing and shoving, and I was just telling them to calm down, and next minute I just felt I was the back of my head, and I just fell into the ground, and I can't remember anything like it.
24-year-old Mark Burnett was taken to hospital where he received 9 staples in his head. Although he was discharged this morning, he's still shaky on his feet.
Still feeling very light in the head, still dizzy, and still a wee bit weak in the legs. So I have to go see a doctor tomorrow and get some tablets for my dizziness.
Despite the concern shown by this officer, Mark says the police weren't interested in anything other than being heavy-handed with the protesters.
Listen, no problem. This got way out of hand. Shouldn't have. Well, they were there trying to keep a peaceful demonstration, but obviously that didn't happen.
Well, I'm joined now from RUC headquarters by the Acting Deputy Chief Constable, Ronnie Flanagan. Mr. Flanagan, it's not easy policing in Belfast. But did you get it wrong, do you think, on the Ormeau Road?
I think the first thing I want to stress is that we very bitterly regret the outcome of Saturday. We bitterly regret the violence which ensued. We bitterly regret the injuries caused to our officers, and we bitterly regret the injuries caused to any members of the public, including Mr. Burnett.
Well, there was a remark made by one of your colleagues over the weekend, Assistant Chief Constable Bill Stewart. He talked about commendable restraint. That's an interesting interpretation of the television pictures I saw.
Well, I think it's very wrong to judge police action based on a snapshot. I think what you have to do is come to a proper and fair conclusion based on taking all the evidence into account, including the build-up to any particular snapshot of activity. It's important to do that, and that's why we have appointed a very experienced detective superintendent to carry out just such an investigation.
Looking at the day as a whole, though, first of all, you had what went on Lower Ormeau, and the pictures of that are seen, and then almost like round two up in Derry, everybody fired up, and a riot scene up there as well. It was a bad day for the security forces, wasn't it?
Bad day for the province. I think it points up the unenviable, some might say the impossible task in which the police are placed. We, from the Chief Constable down, give these matters the deepest consideration, but we are left to make judgments that cannot hope to reconcile what appear sadly to be irreconcilable viewpoints.
There seems to be a point of view held on both sides, as we saw there from unionist and nationalist politicians, that some sort of mediation machinery should be set up, that you're taking these decisions yourself, and in this instance, you got it wrong. I mean, you could blame it on someone else if there was a mediation set up, couldn't you?
Well, we don't seek to blame it on anybody else, and I'm not saying we got it wrong. What we attempted on Saturday in both contentious locations was to allow a legitimate parade and at the same time allow legitimate protest. In the event, violence very quickly ensued, particularly in the Ormeau Road, and we bitterly regret that. But certainly the answer to this lies in the community. If they can come to an agreement, policing these affairs will be very easy. You know, it has to be said that policing contentious parades cost tens and tens of thousands of public money that could be better spent in other areas of policing.
Mr. Flanagan, thank you.
Thank you.
The Sinn Féin President Gerry Adams has said his remarks seen as a threat. This morning, the Northern Ireland Office Minister Baroness Denton says his comments were singularly unhelpful. The Progressive Unionists accused him of pandering to the hard men of republicanism. This report by our political correspondent Stephen Grimison.
Gerry Adams this morning appeared relaxed and unconcerned about the anger he'd stirred up with his remarks about the IRA yesterday. He'd taken unionist condemnation, he said, with a grain of salt. Outside the City Hall on Sunday, he'd been heckled by a man who called out, "Bring back the IRA."
They haven't gone away, you know.
Today, he said that had not been meant as a threat.
I think those who have swooped on that remark were going to take exception to what I was saying anyway, and to take that remark out of the...
Many homes to be broken, and tears to be shed, and orphans to be made, and widows to be made, that's still with us.
Ulster Unionists say the Sinn Féin president's remarks confirm their suspicions that the IRA could turn on the violence again if they don't get what they want.
However, I think we've got to put on record that the vast majority of the people in Northern Ireland have remained remarkably calm throughout this whole business, and the crowd scenes that the Sinn Féin have sought to develop haven't actually materialised because very many self-respecting nationalists, and I would suggest many Roman Catholics, have said, no, that's not the way we want to go, and they've kept away.
Loyalists say it's time for Republicans to instil confidence in the peace process.
They need to say, loudly and clearly, they need to say it today, that their weapons are defensive and that under no circumstance will they countenance first strike. The Loyalists will reciprocate, and therefore giving the ordinary people, those who were the potential serried ranks of victims, the opportunity to feel good.
But the SDLP argues that the best way forward is through all-party talks.
Events at the weekend, confirm the difficulty that we face, but they confirm that if we don't go forward, we will go back. And it's the British government who are in a position now to help everybody to move forward.
Pressure is building on John May.
Brown Square is a small Protestant housing estate, separated from Catholic Divis Street by some waste ground and the Millfield Technical College. It's normally quiet, with residents happy to let their children play in the park built on part of that waste.